Vivillon is a terrible Pokemon in competitive singles. With a poor bug-flying typing and low stats, it is ranked in the lowest possible usage tier of ZU in Gen 9. However, despite this, did you know that Vivillon actually has a viable role in the highest power level format of competitive singles, that is anything goes, a format where there are no rules at all and you can use any Pokemon in the game. Not only is Vivillon viable here, it has the potential to completely sweep entire teams containing the most powerful legendaries in the game. Even though Vivillon is a low tier bug-flying type Pokemon, with many things going against it, it is actually the supreme version of this type of Pokemon. It outclasses most other early game bug-flying types. Vivillon has the ability Compound Eyes, which is a great ability, enhancing the accuracy of all of your moves by 1.3x. Vivillon has this in conjunction with Sleep Powder, and this is very significant, turning Sleep Powder into a semi-unreliable sleep-inflicting move to now a much more consistent one. Vivillon also benefits from the Compound Eyes accuracy buff on the move Hurricane, which is a flying type special attack with 110 power. Great attack if it lands, and if rain is up to boost its accuracy, but the 70% accuracy is the real drawback here. But Compound Eyes makes this move so much more consistent. On top of that, Vivillon also has the elite boosting move Quiver Dance. This is one of the strongest boosting moves in the whole game, granting +1 special attack, special defense, and speed in a single turn. Infamous on Pokemon like Volcarona for its incredible snowball potential, Vivillon is blessed with this fantastic option. And this is enough to totally outclass other similar Pokemon like Butterfree and Beautifly, who are kind of just strictly worst versions of Vivillon. But being the best early game Butterfly themed Pokemon is not really that much of an achievement, and it's not enough for Vivillon to be ranked that high by Smogon's usage-based metrics. This is still a Pokemon with the terrible bug flying typing and horrendous stats. No matter how great your moveset is, it's going to be difficult to overcome your terrible bulk, low speed, and poor typing. Also, in most generations of OU, something called the Sleep Clause is in place, which is a rule borrowed from the game Pokemon Stadium. This is a rule that prevents more than one Pokemon being put to sleep at a time. And this rule is a very good thing. If not for this rule, fast Pokemon would be able to spam sleep moves and basically lock you out of the game completely, since sleep results in direct inactivity. This is a way to allow sleep to exist in the metagame without banning it outright, and having it feel relatively balanced. Vivillon's option of accurate sleep powder is still of course quite good even within these confines, but it is of course a little bit restricted from its full potential as an option. And unrestricted sleep is a very powerful tool indeed. And this is exactly why Vivillon can actually do something in the highest power level tier in the game of Anything Goes. Because in Anything Goes, there are no clauses or rules in place like this that would prevent Vivillon from absolutely spamming its sleep powder. In Anything Goes, there is no sleep clause, and you can put as many Pokemon you want on the enemy team to sleep as you like. And in fact, this is a very popular and a good strategy in the Anything Goes tier, unsurprisingly. The strategy of spamming sleep moves in Anything Goes is so good that even a very underwhelming Pokemon in other areas, like Vivillon, with such poor stats and typing, can actually work in Anything Goes because of its accurate sleep move and the things it can do after putting an enemy to sleep. The key here is that Vivillon has Sleep Powder and Quiver Dance. So after an enemy is put to sleep, you have a completely free opportunity to boost up with Quiver Dance, and now that you're faster, you are able to put even more things to sleep than you previously could. And this creates a bit of a snowball effect. You put an enemy to sleep, you Quiver Dance up, making yourself more powerful and faster. Then you put the next thing to sleep, allowing yourself another free turn, and then you Quiver Dance even more. You can basically lock the opponent out of the game completely, boost up to maximum boosts, and then you can start spamming Hurricane, and this is a pretty great move to spam with a high power and a good neutral flying typing that hits everything for decent damage. And yes, in Anything Goes, there are ways to combat sleep. Pokemon may carry the Lumberry to cure their sleep, or the safety goggles to be immune to powder-based sleep moves. But the potential is there for this Vivillon to absolutely destroy entire teams single-handedly, in the right circumstance. And that is a much more powerful, version of existence than what Vivillon can achieve in the lower tiers where its sleep capabilities are restricted. Unfortunately, Vivillon in Gen 9 is not having a very fun experience for multiple different reasons. First of all, Gen 9 is a generation that introduced a universal sleep ban in all of Smogon's tiers, which was a controversial decision. But regardless of all of that, all the baggage behind that decision, terrible news for Vivillon, isn't it? Even sleep powder within the confines of sleep clause is no longer an option. It just can't use sleep powder at all. Obviously a massive nerf for Vivillon. And you'd think that maybe it could still achieve those great heights it always could. In Gen 9, anything goes. Unrestricted from the sleep ban, able to click sleep powder to its heart's content. But there are some problems for Vivillon here too. The biggest one being the presence of the new legendary Pokemon Miraidon, who is actually only available to use in Anything Goes. It's that powerful, banned from Ubers. And the problem with Miraidon is that it's a legendary with the ability Hadron Engine, which sets electric terrain on the field. And electric terrain will actually make everything grounded on the field immune to sleep. So the presence of Miraidon is a massive nerf to this Vivillon set that in previous generations of Anything Goes could go crazy, potentially. Now it is way worse because you're contending with Miraidon, who is very common, very powerful, and totally shuts down sleep. In fact, that's one of the benefits of running a Miraidon, not only for all of its other advantages, but because it's an insurance against sleep, which is a powerful mechanic in Anything Goes. Another thing that's quite bad for Vivillon in Gen 9 Anything Goes is the presence of Clodsire. Clodsire is sometimes seen in Anything Goes for its ability Unaware, which can ignore stat stage changes completely. Clodsire has great bulk and is an effective special wall that also has the benefit of totally ignoring enemy boosts. Boosts are a common strategy in Anything Goes. So even if Vivillon faces a team without Miraidon, it's going to have to contend with Clodsire, who is a special wall that ignores all of its Quiver Dance boosts. And even if you put the Clodsire to sleep a bunch of times, you're really not going to be doing that much damage to it since your boosts will be totally ignored and your special attack isn't that high, plus Clodsire is really specially bulky. Never before have we had such a good, specially defensive Unaware Pokemon with viability in Anything Goes. There's been Quagsire before, but Quagsire is not as specially bulky as Clodsire. So even though Vivillon's days of dominance are over in Gen 9, within this butterfly that seems so innocuous, there is a indescribable fire. A power that when released can make even the strongest beings that we know of in the entire universe quake in fear. And even Mega Rayquaza and Primal Groudon have a respect and an anxiety towards Vivillon, knowing its true potential. There is another compelling example of a otherwise terrible Pokemon with viability in Anything Goes, and that is the example of Wo-Chien. Wo-Chien is a new legendary in Gen 9, a member of the Ruinous Quartet, and is by quite a significant margin the worst of this legendary quartet. Wo-Chien is ranked in the extremely low PU tier by Smogon's usage. Despite having very impressive bulk, with well-rounded defensive stats and the ability Tablets of Ruin, which is very good, reducing the enemy's attack stats significantly, Wo-Chien grapples with a terrible defensive typing of Dark Grass. These are not very complementary types on the defensive side, mostly just stacking a bunch of weaknesses including a damning ×4 bug weakness, but also weaknesses to fighting and fairy and ice and fire, which are extremely common attacking types. Wo-Chien, as a defensive Pokemon, cannot really overcome these glaring weaknesses that it must face. And also it does feel like it has a bit of a shallow move pool compared to its contemporaries. Ting-Lu, who is in the very same Ruinous Quartet, has far more valuable options, notably its entry hazards, which create permanent progress in a game. Wo-Chien, on the other hand, is at least able to do something with its defensive entry points, like knock off an item with the move Knock Off or click Leech Seed, but these are not so outstanding to give Wo-Chien much value in the competitive singles environment. So how then could Wo-Chien actually be viable in the Anything Goes tier, showing up on the viability rankings of Gen 9 Anything Goes, and being a genuine, considerable choice for a defensive Pokemon? Well, there's a simple reason for that, and it's not like the Vivillon example where some rule is restricting Wo-Chien from its full potential. No, Wo-Chien is operating mostly the same in Anything Goes as it does in lower tiers, but Wo-Chien happens to fit well in the environment of Anything Goes against the elite level threats that exist there. Most notably, Wo-Chien is an effective check against the famous Calyrex Shadow Rider, who is one of the strongest Pokemon of all time, only available to use in Anything Goes. Perhaps the strongest special attacker in Pokemon history with its absurd offensive stats, ramping with Grimnay and the ridiculous move Astral Barrage. Wo-Chien has the benefit of being a great switch-in to both of Calyrex Shadow Rider's stab types. It has a ghost resistance and a psychic immunity. And this is true of any dark type, of course, but Wo-Chien stands out from other dark types in the game with its great special defense. And this special defense does allow it to switch in against Calyrex Shadow Rider and then threaten it directly with a stab knockoff, which is ×4 super effective. Now even here, Wo-Chien is competing with its much more accomplished brother Ting Lu, who is also a bulky dark type that is a good switch in against Calyrex Shadow Rider for the same reasons. But Wo-Chien does stand out from its brother in some key ways. Being a grass type, Wo-Chien is actually more effective than Ting Lu is against Kyogre. Ting Lu is of course a ground type, meaning it's weak to water. Wo-Chien resists water and resists Kyogre's coverage of electric as well. So Wo-Chien can be both an answer to Calyrex Shadow Rider and Kyogre, where Ting Lu cannot. Now Wo-Chien is not foolproof against Kyogre, of course, because Kyogre does carry the option of Ice Beam, but with full special bulk, Wo-Chien can tank an Ice Beam pretty well, deals about 30% from a non-specs Kyogre, and this also requires them to click Ice Beam preemptively as Wo-Chien comes in. Wo-Chien does 1v1 Kyogre quite well in a lot of cases. Kyogre is frightened by a potential grass type attack that Wo-Chien could have, and does not want to get knocked off and lose its item, does not want to get leech seeded. I wouldn't call Wo-Chien a hard wall against Kyogre or anything, but it is an effective deterrent against Kyogre spamming its most powerful options, and it is definitely much better against Kyogre than Ting Lu is. Wo-Chien also matches up quite well against Arceus Ground, as it has a ground resistance from its grass typing. And Wo-Chien can sort of answer Miraidon too. It's going to take massive damage from Draco Meteor, of course, but it does resist electric, preventing Miraidon from spamming its electric type attacks. This is where Ting Lu is a bit better than Wo-Chien. Ting Lu is a better answer to Miraidon than Wo-Chien, but Wo-Chien can still sort of answer Miraidon, which is valuable. So Wo-Chien happens to be a pretty good defensive answer to a bunch of different common Anything Goes relevant Pokemon at the same time, with some matchups defensively that are superior to its brother Ting Lu and other similar defensive Pokemon, giving Wo-Chien a genuine, viable role in the Gen 9 Anything Goes tier. The option of terastallizing poison also gives Wo-Chien a little bit more to do defensively, granting it resistances to fairy and fighting, and neutrality to types that it was previously weak to. A poison type Wo-Chien can actually take on things like Arceus Fairy, etc., giving you another option in the back pocket. This of course requires you to Terra, which is a commitment, but it's an extra way to get value out of Wo-Chien's raw stats with a different type profile, which is always good, and that option is not irrelevant in this conversation. It is also worth noting that as a grass type, Wo-Chien is naturally immune to powder moves, so if you ever do face sleep-inflicting Pokemon, which commonly use Spore and Sleep Powder, Wo-Chien is a line of defense against that as well. Sleep strategies are not as prominent as they have been in previous Anything Goes metagames because of the presence of Miraidon, but this is still a little bit of a relevant point in Wo-Chien's favor, another wrinkle. I think this one is quite beautiful. Wo-Chien's poor viability in the more normal Smogon formats is a bit of a shame to me. I love Wo-Chien's visual design, an old and wise looking snail with ancient history associated. It's a beautiful Pokemon that is unfortunately just not very functional in most tiers, and yet the place where it was perhaps most functional of all is Anything Goes, the highest power level tier in the game, where with its sage wisdom it has the tools to answer and keep at bay truly elite level Pokemon the likes of which we've never seen. There's something beautiful and poetic about that, isn't there, folks? Sylveon is another Pokemon bad in most contexts that is very good in another specific format. Sylveon in Gen 9 is ranked in the NU tier, which is quite a low tier. Fundamentally, Sylveon is not egregiously terrible. It would seem quite good, in fact, when you look at it. It's a mono fairy type, which is a mono typing you can't go too wrong with. It's a very good typing. Its stats are also quite good, with a high special defense, special attack, and HP. Sylveon also has the strong ability Pixelate. This is a very good ability that turns normal type attacks into fairy type attacks, and also gives them a 1.2x power boost. So what's the problem with Sylveon in most environments? Well, the problem with Sylveon is that it's a bit plain. Sylveon's options are not that fantastic. Pixelate is a great ability in theory, but the result on Sylveon is not that outstanding. It can turn the move Hyper Voice into a fairy type attack, which is good. Ends up being a very higher power fairy type attack, but it's really not that different to Moonblast, which most fairy types get already. And that in some ways is better because of the special attack drop chance. Moonblast has high enough power. It's an extremely good attack, and so the option of Hyper Voice is maybe a little bit better than Moonblast, but this is the only thing that you get out of your ability Pixelate, which doesn't really feel worth it. And when you compare Sylveon to a Pokemon like, for example, Clefable, Clefable has the ability Magic Guard, which offers so many more benefits than Pixelate would for just a single, slightly better attack. Clefable is probably the biggest direct competitor to Sylveon, having very similar options, but a superior ability and better utility as well, with options like Stealth Rock, Encore, etc. Even better offensive options. Sylveon has Wish, it can Calm Mind, it can click its Hyper Voice, it's got a couple of interesting options, but not much, actually. It's just a standard fairy type that finds itself outclassed by other similar Pokemon very easily. Another competitor is Primarina, who is a water fairy type, which is a superior typing overall. Even in mid to low tiers, you have Comfey, who's having quite a moment right now with its Draining Kiss Triage combo. That has better sweeping potential than Sylveon can manage. So in normal Smogon tiers, Sylveon feels a bit lacking, a little bit underwhelming. Maybe if its moveset had some pivoting option, better utility moves, things like knockoff, hazards, options like that, maybe Sylveon would see more use, but as it stands, Sylveon feels a bit weaker than similar Pokemon, and is lower usage as a result. But there's one environment where Sylveon is actually quite significantly better than its contemporaries, within the parameters of that format, and that is the 1v1 format. 1v1 is a very interesting alternate competitive Pokemon format, where you bring a team of 3 Pokemon. You face against an enemy with a team of 3 Pokemon, and in the team preview you just select one of those 3 Pokemon to battle in a 1v1 against the enemy. So the team preview here has a bit of a rock, paper, scissors element. You want to try to predict which of their 3 Pokemon they will bring to the battle, and pick the best Pokemon you can out of your 3 to match up against that. And the actual battle itself is just one Pokemon against one Pokemon, and this kind of changes everything. It makes a lot of fundamental things about competitive Pokemon completely different. Things like entry hazards have no value whatsoever because there's no switching. You just have one Pokemon in the field, you can't switch to anything, so entry hazards are totally useless. Things like debuffs are way better. Debuffing the enemy and lowering their stats is usually far worse than boosting your own stats because the enemy can simply switch out to completely refresh their debuffs and get rid of them. There's this easy get rid of your debuffs button, which is a simple switch out, but in 1v1, this is not the case. And another thing that is much better in 1v1 than it is in any other format are recharge moves, like the move Hyper Beam. Hyper Beam is pretty much never seen in normal competitive play because it comes with a serious drawback. Hyper Beam has a massive power of 150, which is huge and can KO most things in the game neutrally, but it has the terrible, terrible drawback of forcing you to recharge for an entire turn after using it. And this is devastating in most contexts, because sitting there and giving your opponent a free turn can spell absolute disaster for you. They can just KO you, they could boost up, they could get a free switch to something powerful. You never want to give up free turns if you can avoid it. In competitive Pokemon, that's a way to lose quickly, and Hyper Beam gives your opponent a free turn on a silver platter. But in 1v1, all of a sudden, these recharge moves are actually really good, for the simple reason that you only have to KO one Pokemon. And so if Hyper Beam gets the KO, the recharge turn doesn't matter, you've already won the entire battle. You've eliminated the one Pokemon you had to eliminate. So it's almost as if these recharge moves have no drawback in the 1v1 context. Unless the opponent can live the attack, but that's much less likely to happen. There's no defensive switches to play around and capitalize on the recharge turn. And this is why Sylveon is so great in the 1v1 context, because it has the combination of Pixelate and Hyper Beam, which is absolutely outstanding. Not only because Pixelate turns Hyper Beam into a Fairy type attack, which is a buff in and of itself. Fairy is a far better offensive type than normal, but also Pixelate boosts the power of Hyper Beam by 1.2x. Boosting the power here up to an incredible base 180, which is absolutely huge. Now all of a sudden Sylveon has this absolute nuclear weapon up its sleeve. If it's ever up against a neutral enemy, it's probably just going to KO it with this insane stab 180 power Hyper Beam. Not many things in the game can live that, and this is incredible in the 1v1 context, allowing you to have one-hit KOs in so many more matchups, which is obviously excellent for you. So while in other formats, the Pixelate ability doesn't really provide Sylveon with much meaningful benefit over its contemporaries, with an option that is just slightly better than Moonblast, in the 1v1 environment, Pixelate grants Sylveon one of the strongest attacks possible in the whole format and one of the scariest options in all of 1v1. A very inspirational moment for Sylveon fans everywhere. Another very fun example of this phenomenon is with the Pokemon Brambleghast, a new Gen 9 Pokemon. Brambleghast is ranked in the low NU tier. It is, overall, a rather underwhelming Grass Ghost type Pokemon, suffering most of all from its low 55 base HP. It does have some interesting things going for it, like its access to Rapid Spin, which is a rather scarce utility option that is very good. Also, its access to Strength Sap, which is a great form of healing, also scarce, that has the potential to fully heal you, has more PP than most healing moves, and also lowers the enemy's attack in the process. Very, very good move. But not quite enough considering the low stats and the competition from other ghosts to be a very high usage Pokemon here, settling in the NU tier, where it rightfully belongs in conventional formats. But there is a format where Brambleghast is actually a highly regarded Pokemon, and is quite common on genuine competitive teams, and that is the Monotype format. Monotype is a Pokemon format where your entire team is required to share a single type. This of course brings with it serious team building challenges. If your entire team shares the same type, they're probably going to share many of the same weaknesses, and so you need to consider that and cover those weaknesses in intelligent ways, using Pokemon with certain dual typings that erase those weaknesses or are neutral to them. A good example of this is on mono fire type teams. You will often see Volcanion, because Volcanion is a fire type with a water immunity from its ability Water Absorb. So most of the rest of your team is going to be weak to water, but you have the Volcanion as a water immune Pokemon to patch that up a little bit. Sometimes another problem with these monotype teams is that whenever they need a specific utility option or some sort of gap to be filled on a team, their options are more limited. They have to use only Pokemon within the type of their monotype team, and sometimes there aren't any great Pokemon with the utility they need. I'm sure you can imagine that Ghost would be a pretty good type to choose for a monotype team. Ghost is a great type in general. Running a bunch of Ghost types is probably pretty good, isn't it? But a problem with Ghost types in Gen 9 monotype is that the only Ghost type in the game that has the move Rapid Spin is, well, it's Brambleghast. This is the only one. So if you want to run a Rapid Spinner on a mono Ghost team, your only option in the whole game is Brambleghast. This is not like other formats where you can just chuck a Great Tusk on here or a Defog or Corviknight. If your monotype team does not have a type shared with those elite hazard removal Pokemon, your best bet is going to be some random guy, and in this case it's Brambleghast. Each type in monotype has their own viability rankings, which is quite cool. Every single type has a separate ranking. And for the Ghost type, Brambleghast is actually in the A rank. In the monotype Ghost viability rankings, Brambleghast is ranked in the same tier as Goldengo and Spectria, which is pretty damn impressive. And this goes to show just how important the utility of Rapid Spin is to our Pokemon team. But it's not just the fact that it has Rapid Spin, also the fact that Bramblegast does offer the team spikes as well. And this is a convenient 2 birds in 1 stone situation. Obviously spikes is particularly good on a ghost type, mono type team because your whole team can block Rapid Spin. So you really want to be able to set hazards because hazards are so much better for you. Especially true if you're running Goldengo, which you probably are. It's one of the best reasons to run a mono ghost team. Goldengo can of course also block Defog and Mortal Spin from removing hazards from the field. So for that reason, Bramblegast is pretty imperative for most mono ghost teams in the mono type format. The mere fact that it sets spikes and has the ever valuable Rapid Spin is just too difficult to pass up. Not only is it the only option, it is an extremely important option. I suppose it also helps that Bramblegast has a pretty good attack stat and access to Power Whip. Bramblegast is a bit of a line of defense against ground types, which the mono ghost teams may struggle with. Ghost types are often frail and take a lot of damage from physical threats, so that does help. Bramblegast has a decent potential to switch in on such Pokemon and threaten them with a Stab Power Whip. You also have Stab Poltergeist, which is a cool option too, if you need more Ghost Stab. To be honest, you probably don't on a mono ghost team, but it's there if you need it. And then Strength Sap for a form of healing. This Bramblegast sample team uses a full defense investment with HP on the Bramblegast, which makes perfect sense, doesn't it? And I suppose another wrinkle in Bramblegast's favor here is the fact that it has the ability Wind Rider, which grants an immunity to wind-based moves. In particular, Hurricane is the big one that you're immune to. Some things do use Hurricane here, like Zapdos, so that is at least another good thing that Bramblegast can offer. But what's interesting about Bramblegast is that it is serving this purpose on not just mono ghost teams, but also mono grass teams. For mono grass teams, Bramblegast is also the most elite option for a Rapid Spinner. On the grass type viability rankings, Bramblegast also finds itself in the A rank. So this otherwise pretty terrible Pokemon in other tiers is an A rank Pokemon for 2 different mono type teams. Isn't that absolutely impressive for this ghostly tumbleweed? And it's a bit more impressive in the grass case, because mono grass teams do not only have Bramblegast as a Rapid Spinner option, they have 2 other options that are also lower tier, but Bramblegast is facing competition here, where it is not in the ghost conversation. There is also Serena, who is a grass type Rapid Spinner, and there is Toedscruel, who is a grass type Rapid Spinner. So Bramblegast is out-competing both of these other alternatives for Rapid Spinners. And I think that the reason for that is pretty clear. Serena is alright, it does have a good attack stat, but it's a pretty plain Pokemon with limited options, kind of carried by the option of Rapid Spin in particular. But Bramblegast has far more exciting options, Spikes being an obvious great one. And on a mono grass team, you actually do appreciate having some Ghost Stab. This is more unique of an offensive tool in this context than it would be on the mono ghost team, obviously. And also Shadow Sneak is a valued option as a bit of priority. Spikes is the most important one. Having Spikes and Rapid Spin in one is very nice, but these offensive tools are not irrelevant either. They are quite valuable. And also the simple fact that Bramblegast is a ghost type means it itself can block Rapid Spin from the enemy, and having a ghost type on your mono grass team is very nice for that particular purpose, being able to block enemy Rapid Spin. So Bramblegast here is actually offering a lot of great utility in one for mono grass teams, far more than Serena possibly could, and also more than Toedscruel could. Toedscruel's defensive typing is inferior, its options are inferior. Bramblegast is the clear best Rapid Spinner for the mono grass context. Also, I happen to really enjoy Bramblegast as a Pokemon design all around. I think it's fantastic. A ghostly tumbleweed is a beautiful idea, its visual design is striking, and I think its gameplay design is quite cool. It's underpowered for Gen 9, for the standard formats, of course, but I think it has well-balanced stats, well-balanced options, love its utility move pool, and the ability Wind Rider is thematically appropriate, as well as being quite a fun form of immunity to a specific category of move. So I'm a big fan of Bramblegast. I think it's peak Pokemon design, honestly. So the fact that Bramblegast is an elite option for both of its mono types that it can exist on is pretty awesome in my opinion. I mean, when you're restricted and you can't use those all-in-one good utility Pokemon that outclass so many other things in those other formats like Great Tusk, Gliscor, Landorus Therian, etc., then isn't it fun how Brambleghast suddenly becomes this elite auto-include guy? Just because it is the one with Rapid Spin and Hazards and Spin Blocking, and other useful things like Strength, Sap, and Priority. It's this all-in-one package of everything you need in a more restricted scenario where you can't just throw on a Great Tusk, you have to be a bit more creative. And finally, another lower tier Pokemon that's terrible in most contexts also finds itself with surprising viability in the monotype format. That Pokemon is Avalugg. Avalugg is one of many Pokemon that suffers from the fact that it is a defensive Ice type. Ice is a very offensively oriented type. It hits many things super effectively, it's commonly used for its offensive potency. But on the defensive side, Ice only has one resistance to itself and so many weaknesses, making it an absolutely atrocious defensive type. And so defensive Ice types just tend to be dysfunctional for that purpose. It's not a type that excels at all defensively. Avalugg is maybe the most extreme example of a defensively designed Ice type. Its defensive stats are excellent. It has 95 HP and 184 base defense, which is enormous. It's physically skewed with a very low special defense, but the physical defense is absolutely incredible. Avalugg's move pool is also pretty solid. It has Recover, Body Press to take advantage of its enormous defense and deal impressive damage, Rapid Spin as well, which is always a beautiful option to have. But the simple fact remains that it's a damn Ice type, and so functioning defensively is going to be very difficult. But in the world of monotype, Avalugg, much like Brambleghast, suddenly looks a lot more attractive when you're only allowed to use Ice types on your mono Ice team, and suddenly you need a Pokemon with Avalugg's strengths. In any other context, you'd choose something better than Avalugg, but if you can only choose an Ice type, Avalugg is going to have to do. Ice monotype teams are, unsurprisingly, very aggressive. Ice excels as an offensive type, and so you're going to want to take advantage of that and run good offensive Pokemon like Weavile and Kyurem. Mono Ice teams also very commonly run Ninetales Alola, because obviously setting snow on the field is pretty excellent when your entire team is Ice type. They will all receive defense boosts in the snow from their Ice typing. You also enable the option of Blizzard on all of your Pokemon, which is very powerful. For this reason, it's also common to see Slush Rush Pokemon on mono Ice teams that are usually quite bad, like Cetitan and Alolan Sandslash. If you're running snow anyway, if you're sort of forced into that by running a mono Ice team in the first place, there's much more of an incentive to chuck on a Slush Rush Pokemon, and this helps with speed control pretty well, gives you another powerful, fast threat to take advantage of for your aggressive game plan. But at the end of the day, you do need some sort of defensive backbone, don't you? If you're too all-out aggressive and you can't make any defensive switches at all, this will be a problem. I mean, you could go in a hyper-offense direction and completely ignore any defensive backbone whatsoever, but it is usually pretty worthwhile to just chuck on an Avalugg. Avalugg will fill the gaps your team needs to fill. It has incredibly high defense, and it is pretty good at answering most physical threats, even with the weaknesses, because you're going to have that snow boost up consistently on your actual defense stat is just so incredibly high. And also, who needs Rapid Spin more than a mono Ice team? Your whole damn team is incredibly vulnerable to Stealth Rock. So it's extremely important to have Hazard Removal, and Avalugg is by far the best option for a Hazard Remover on mono Ice teams. Yes, you could run Boots, but you usually can't afford to run Boots on your whole team. That's a bit overkill. You can run it on a couple, but having Rapid Spin on the team and some sort of defensive check to physical threats is a pretty attractive concept when you're in such dire need for these things, with the limited options within the Ice type. Avalugg's combo of Iron Defense and Body Press is also not irrelevant. That can sometimes be a win con, so that is worthy of note too, and it has an incredibly hard-hitting Body Press with such a high snow-boosted defense stat that is worthwhile too. So Avalugg becomes more consistent on mono Ice teams because snow is always up, and also it is just the only option in a snowstorm. Some other Ice-type rapid spinners include Delibird, which is certainly not an option, and Cryogonal. Maybe you could consider Cryogonal, but I think Avalugg is far better. There's Alolan Sandslash as well, but Alolan Sandslash is, of course, more of an offensive Pokemon. Avalugg is more defensive, and so Avalugg is the choice for a rapid spinner and a defensive Pokemon of some sort on a mono ice team, and therefore it has viability in this context when it wouldn't in the standard context. And we competitive Pokemon gamers often make fun of Game Freak for designing defensive ice types in the first place. Why do they keep doing this when obviously ice types can't function defensively? But in the case of monotype, this is the one area where these mono ice gamers are actually glad that they bothered to design a defensive ice type, because if they didn't, there would be nothing else to use. And that would be quite a disaster, wouldn't it? At least they have something. Even if in most formats you're not going to use Avalugg, in this scenario, Avalugg is very much needed and very much appreciated. So thank you, Avalugg, for being the table creature that holds the world on its shoulders. Thank you for watching, folks. Are there any examples that I missed here of Pokemon that are bad in most arenas but thrive in specific formats? You let me know down below in the comments, and thank you for watching.